flight attendant mocked an elderly passenger, unaware he was Clint Eastwood. What followed was a powerful lesson in humility that left the entire cabin in stunned silence. The bustling airport of Texas thrummed with energy as passengers moved swiftly toward their gates. The announcements echoed overhead, blending with the hum of rolling suitcases and the shuffle of footsteps. It was a typical afternoon of travelers, each absorbed in their own journey. Among them, a figure stood out, Clint Eastwood, his presence commanding attention, though he moved with the same quiet confidence as anyone else. As he made his way toward the boarding gate, a flight attendant, offering a polite smile, greeted him. But her expression faltered as she caught sight of him, the smile quickly replaced by a sneer. "This way to economy, sir," she said without even glancing at his ticket. Clint glanced at his ticket, then looked back at the attendant. "Doesn't it say first class?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. The attendant's expression shifted, a trace of skepticism playing on her face. "First class? Let me see." She grabbed the ticket, scanned it quickly, and her surprise was evident when she looked back at him. "First class, huh?" she murmured, still not quite believing it. After a beat, she handed the ticket back to him, her tone dismissive. "Make yourself comfortable." As Clint entered the first-class cabin, a few passengers were already settling into their seats. One of them, whispering urgently to her husband, caught a glimpse of him. "Isn't that him?" The husband squinted in recognition but didn't say much. The air was thick with quiet curiosity. Nearby, the flight attendant's voice broke the tension. "When you can't even find your seat, maybe you shouldn't be flying at all," she muttered, just loud enough for Clint to hear. Clint, his face unreadable, glanced toward the couple as they hesitated. With a subtle gesture, he signaled for them to stay quiet, his composed demeanor disarming any instinct to intervene. It wasn't until a few moments later when the captain's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard this flight to San Francisco. A special welcome to Mr. Eastwood. An honor to have you with us today." The murmur of recognition rippled through the cabin, and the couple's eyes widened in realization. It was an unexpected yet humble gesture from Clint Eastwood, one that left everyone puzzled. Why did he remain silent when he could easily have made a scene? As the passengers settled into their seats, the flight attendants made their rounds to ensure everyone was properly buckled in before takeoff. When one of them passed by Clint, he politely asked, "Could you help this old guy with his seatbelt?" The flight attendant, smiling warmly, bent down to assist him, but as she finished, the earlier flight attendant reappeared, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Don't bother with him," she said, her voice sharp. "What's he even doing here?" She let out a dry laugh before walking away, but Clint noticed the flicker of unease in her eyes, a subtle crack in her usual composure. Clint's generous nature couldn't ignore it. He turned to the other flight attendant, his voice soft but sincere. "Thank you, you're very kind. But is she all right? She seemed a little worried. Is everything okay?" The sweet flight attendant, noticing Clint Eastwood's calm demeanor, assumed he might have been offended. She quickly tried to ease the tension, offering a soft explanation. "Oh, don't worry about her. She's just nervous. It's her first time handling the announcements." Clint gave a nod of understanding and leaned back, settling into his seat. But just as he began to relax, the couple who had recognized him earlier approached. "Sir, we're so sorry you had to go through that," the woman said, her voice filled with regret. "You're our greatest hero. You don't deserve this kind of treatment." Clint gave them a warm, polite smile. "No one really deserves that kind of treatment," he replied gently. "But it's all right. She's young and, well, gullible." The couple exchanged a look, their admiration for Clint deepening. They realized something important. Not all famous people are what the world perceives them to be. There was a quiet strength and wisdom about Clint Eastwood that went far beyond the films. It was something they could never fully grasp, but it left them with a profound sense of respect. As everything was set, the flight attendants stood still, waiting for the announcement to begin the safety procedures. But the minutes ticked by, and they continued to wait. Something was off. The plane had not yet taken off, despite it being well past the scheduled departure time. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances, whispering among themselves. When Clint Eastwood and the others glanced out the window, they realized the plane was, in fact, moving, slowly but unmistakably taxiing down the runway. A wave of concern swept through the cabin. Frequent flyers knew something was wrong. They were accustomed to the routine safety announcements before takeoff. Why hadn't it happened yet? Clint Eastwood's sharp eye quickly pieced the situation together. His gaze turned toward the flight attendant, who had earlier been rude to him. She looked more tense than ever, her hands trembling slightly as she hesitated near the intercom. It was clear. She was the one who was supposed to make the announcement, but something was holding her back. After the plane took off, the captain addressed the delay with a quick apology, then proceeded with the usual announcements. Passengers relaxed, reassured by the familiar routine. But Clint Eastwood, ever perceptive, felt something was still amiss. He turned to the flight attendant beside him and asked, "Where's your colleague?" The attendant's face tightened with anger, but she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Sir, don't worry, everything's fine," she said before quickly moving away to resume her duties. But Clint wasn't convinced. A sense of unease gnawed at him. He got up from his seat and made his way down the aisle, hearing the murmurs of passengers whispering excitedly when they saw him. After passing through several cabins, he finally found the flight attendant, alone in a quiet corner, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed. "Crying won't fix anything," Clint said, his voice calm and steady. The flight attendant froze, not recognizing the voice at first, but when she turned, her anger flared again upon seeing who it was. "What now? Lost your seat again?" she snapped, her frustration bubbling over. A few passengers noticed the tension and exchanged uneasy glances. One even looked ready to step in, but hesitated, unsure if it was the right moment. Clint, with his trademark coolness, slid into the seat next to her. "You're going to need to try harder to offend me," he said with a light, almost playful smile. Her anger flared brighter, but something in his steady presence seemed to wear her down. Finally, she broke, her voice shaking as tears welled up. "Please, I messed up the announcement. Maybe that's why I'll never be a star like you." Clint studied her, his face softening. Despite her earlier rudeness, something about her situation tugged at him. He'd never been one to turn a blind eye to someone in need. "You've got more to offer than you think," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Everyone makes mistakes. It's how you handle them that matters." Clint Eastwood, the legendary Hollywood icon known for his tough persona, calmly enduring nonsense from a flight attendant? No one could have predicted it. But perhaps there was more to Clint than people realized. With his trademark composure, he leaned in and said, "If you focus on the task at hand instead of worrying about who's watching, you'll do just fine." It was simple yet profound advice. Coming from a Hollywood legend, it carried weight, words that could change someone's perspective, maybe even their career. But the flight attendant, too wrapped up in her frustration, completely missed the humility in his words. With a sneer, she shot back, "Oh, now you're gonna teach me how to make an announcement? You think it's that easy? Why don't you give it a try?" Her response sent an uncomfortable hush over the cabin. Clint's offer of help had been met with hostility, and her rudeness was starting to wear thin. Everyone had been expecting something different from the woman who'd mocked him. But Clint didn't flinch. "Sure I will," Clint said, his voice steady. He knew how to handle a scene. Maybe it was time to show this flight attendant what an announcement really looked like. He stood up, his calm determination cutting through the tension. The flight attendant, seeing his persistence, rolled her eyes and laughed. "Oh, really?" she said, looking to the passengers as if searching for validation. But when she glanced around, she realized no one was on her side. The passengers had begun to shift uncomfortably, and not one of them backed her up. Still, she hadn't figured out who she was dealing with, or just how much she had underestimated the man she'd mocked. Clint Eastwood took the mic, his deep, charismatic voice filling the cabin as he slipped effortlessly into character. With a twinkle in his eye and his signature cowboy accent, he began, "Ladies and gentlemen, you're heading towards San Francisco, so keep those seatbelts fastened tight. You might feel a little turbulence. The air's heavy out there." His simple words sparked laughter and light-hearted cheers from the passengers. A chorus of "Do ya, punk?" rang out as if the entire plane had instantly recognized the legend in their midst. But the flight attendant, still unaware, stood nearby, watching the scene unfold in confusion. "Oh, what's happened to all of you? He's just an old guy," she muttered, her frustration evident. She couldn't understand the excitement and continued to dismiss him. Clint, unfazed, leaned into his legendary persona and delivered a famous line from Dirty Harry. "You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?" The cabin erupted in cheers, and the energy in the plane shifted to a whole new level. It was as though everyone on board was witnessing something special, something they might never experience again. Moments later, the captain rushed over, his face lighting up with excitement. "Mr. Eastwood, I can't believe it. I'm your biggest fan." Without hesitation, he clasped Clint's hand, overcome by the rarity of the situation. The flight attendant, now visibly confused, scowled. "Now you're a fan of this old man too?" she scoffed. The captain shot her a look that could cut glass. "Do you even know who this is?" he asked, his voice full of incredulity. "Clint Eastwood?" the flight attendant stammered, her eyes wide with sudden recognition. Her face flushed as the realization of her mistake hit her. The moments of ridicule she had so carelessly thrown at Clint replayed in her mind. Regret filled her eyes as she turned to Clint and muttered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were." Clint gave a humble, almost playful laugh. "Do you still think I won the lottery?" he asked, his words a gentle reminder of the earlier insult. The flight attendant, now desperately trying to save face, replied softly, "Oh no, no sir, I'm really sorry." The captain, still looking disappointed, turned to her. "What did you do?" His tone was stern, his patience wearing thin. The flight attendant knew that if the captain learned of her earlier behavior, she might face serious consequences. But before the captain could press further, Clint Eastwood intervened with a calm smile. "It's all right. I was just messing with her," he said, diffusing the tension. The passengers, still buzzing with excitement from the earlier exchange, couldn't help but admire Clint's grace. A few murmured that his ability to rise above the rudeness was a testament to his character. One passenger even remarked, "He's humble, even when he's not treated right." As the captain left, the flight attendant, her pride now shattered, approached Clint with an apology. She stumbled over her words, clearly unsure of how to express her regret. Clint, ever the gentleman, gently interrupted her. "I don't like how you treat older people," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You were rude to him. What would you do to others?" The passengers, hearing Clint's words, nodded in agreement. Some even suggested that Clint report her behavior, but the legend simply raised his hand, silencing the cabin. "You know how many people feel threatened by you guys?" Clint continued, his gaze still fixed on the flight attendant. "You want to be an actor? Start with humility." The flight attendant, her heart sinking, realized the weight of her mistake. She quickly apologized, her voice filled with sincerity. "I'm really sorry, sir. I've learned my lesson. I will never judge a book by its cover again." Clint's expression softened. "Good, you must. When you choose films, you'll have to go for the script, not just the name," he said with a knowing smile, signaling that the conversation was over. He knew that sometimes the best way to teach a lesson was to let someone come to the realization on their own. The flight attendant now thanked him, but murmured softly, "How can I ever become an actor when I can't even handle a simple flight announcement?" Her voice was filled with self-doubt, but her words revealed the core of her insecurity. Clint Eastwood leaned slightly forward, his piercing eyes softened with encouragement. "Every great actor stumbles at some point. The trick is learning to use that stumble to your advantage. Now let's start small." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she held the microphone. "But what if I mess up again?" Clint smiled reassuringly, his rugged face exuding confidence. "Then you'll pick yourself up and try again. That's what real actors and real people do." Taking the microphone, he adjusted it slightly and said, "Let me show you." He turned to her and added, "Announcing is no different from delivering a line. It's all about clarity, confidence, and connecting with your audience." Clint began to demonstrate, speaking calmly into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us today. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened as we prepare for a smooth journey to San Francisco." His deep, commanding voice reverberated through the cabin, drawing smiles and cheers from passengers. Clint handed the microphone back to her. Now your turn. She hesitated again, but Clint gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, she started, mimicking his tone and pacing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us today. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened as we prepare for a smooth journey to San Francisco. Her voice quivered at first, but grew steadier with each word. By the time she finished, the cabin erupted in applause. Clint clapped lightly, his expression warm. See? Not so hard, is it? The flight attendant's face lit up with a mix of relief and pride. I did it. Thank you. Good job, Clint said, giving her a pat on the shoulder. Now remember this feeling. It's what you'll need when you step in front of a camera one day. She nodded earnestly, her earlier arrogance replaced by gratitude and newfound humility. Clint smiled, turned, and walked back to his seat, where he leaned back comfortably, closing his eyes as if nothing had happened. The other passengers looked at the flight attendant with admiration. A young boy nearby whispered to his mother, "Mom, Clint Eastwood is not just a movie star. He's a real-life hero." As the flight attendant continued her duties, her demeanor changed entirely. She greeted passengers with a genuine smile, her confidence radiating through her actions. Every now and then, she glanced toward Clint Eastwood, silently thanking him for the lessons she'd carry with her for the rest of her life. For Clint, it was just another quiet moment of teaching and kindness. But for those on the plane, it was a story they'd tell for years. The day Clint Eastwood turned a rude flight attendant into a humbled and inspired young woman. If this story resonated with you, you'll love what we have next. Click on the video on your screen to dive into another inspiring tale that will leave you thinking, smiling, or even move to action. Don't miss it. Your next story is just one click away.